Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about writing and solving equations involving the distributive property. So remember, there's a process that you could think through a word problem, a real life situation, so that you can convert it to an equation that you can use to solve the problem, to answer the question. The first thing we want to do is we want to identify the important information in the problem. Then we want to come up with a verbal description of what's going on, then use that verbal description to write our equation and then solve the problem. So let's go ahead and read this problem and see what's going on. It says in one baseball season, Johnny hit twice the difference of the number of home runs Sarah hit and three. They combined to hit 24 home runs. How many home runs did each player hit? Okay, so let's go ahead and identify our important information. We're going to use different colors for all of these people. So we have here Johnny. Okay, we have here Sarah, and we have our total number. So the total's easy. We know that combined they hit a total of 24 home runs. So that's an important piece of information. Then we need to kind of write expressions that represent the number of home runs Johnny hit and the number of home runs Sarah hit. So the best way to do this is to think about the clues they give us and find what our total unknown is. What do we not know at all? So they give us some clues about one of these players. They tell us Johnny hit twice the difference of the number of home runs that Sarah hit and three, but they don't give us any clues about Sarah. So Sarah, we completely don't know. We have no clues for Sarah. So that's where we want to have our variable. That's our unknown. Since we're talking about home runs, let's go ahead and use the letter H. Now we can use that to develop our expression to represent Johnny. So it says here, Johnny hit twice the difference of the number of home runs Sarah hit and three. So a key here is this word right here, or this the beginning of this phrase here, the difference of. Okay? The difference of tells me that I'm writing a subtraction problem, that I'm subtracting. And so when you see a phrase that starts like this, the difference of, or the sum of if you're adding, the product of if you're multiplying, the quotient of if you're dividing, then what you want to do is you want to build that operation in the order that comes after. So I'm going to be subtracting, right, something. So what comes first in my subtraction expression? The number of home runs Sarah hit. Okay, well, we know that we're calling that H for home runs. And then what's the next piece? And three. So basically, when we say the difference of the number of home runs Sarah hit and three, that means H minus three. But we're not done because we have this word right here twice, which means that we need to multiply by 2. What are we multiplying by 2? The difference of number of home runs Sarah hit and 3. So I can't answer the question H minus 3 because I don't know what H is. So in order to solve this, I'm going to have to multiply H minus 3, the entirety of that, by 2. And that's where the distributive property comes into play here. So we know what Johnny hit, 2 times H minus 3, and we know what Sarah hit. Sarah hit H. And the total of that is 24. So we could kind of verbalize this. If I, what am I going to write as my equation? Well, I'm going to write that Johnny plus Sarah equals 24. Okay, but I can't solve an equation with words, but I know what I could replace for Johnny. I could write 2 times H minus 3. So plus, and then I know what I can write for Sarah. I'm just going to write H. And we know that that equals 24. Well, let me go back and use the colors like I did for everything else. Equals, and purple for 24. Purple 24. All right. So here's our equation. And now all we got to do is solve it. So let's go ahead and take our steps and solve it. So first we have to distribute here, right? So we're going to say, okay, 2 times 1h. That is 2h. Then we have to multiply 2 times negative 3. So positive 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Now we got to bring down the rest of the equation. So we have plus h equals 24. Now, before we move on, we have to ask the question, can I do any combining of like terms? And I see here I have a positive 2h and I have a positive 1h. So when I combine those together, what do I get? I get 3h. And so I have to bring down now the rest of this equation. So 3h minus 6 equals 24. Once I've done that, this is now looking like your regular two-step equation. So in order to get h alone, I need to get rid of 3 and negative 6. And I have to undo addition or subtraction first. So that's going to be the negative 6. How do I get rid of a negative 6? I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So negative 6 plus 6, that cancels out. Remember, we call that additive inverse, leaving me with a 3h on the left-hand side of my equation. And on the right-hand side, I've got 30. And hopefully you already see what you need to do here. I need to I need to get rid of this 3, and that 3 is multiplying h, so I need to divide by 3 on both sides. These 3's cancel out. This gives me h equals 10. So now, who is h? What does h tell me? Well, Sarah hit 10 home runs, okay? And so then what does that tell me about Johnny? Well, let's think. What's 10 minus 3? 7 times 2, 14. So then with Johnny hit 14 home runs. And we could check these two. What's 14 plus 10? It is 24. So that's one example of an equation that you can write with distributive property. So let's take a look at another example here. This one involves rectangles and perimeter. So it says here, a rectangular portrait has 120 inches of framing around its border. The portrait is 12 inches longer than it is wide. Find the length and width of the portrait. So I always tell my students, the first thing you want to do when you are dealing with any kind of problems that involve area or perimeter or shapes is draw the shapes. Draw the shapes and label them. So here's our portrait. You don't have to get all fancy and make these incredible shapes. They just have to work where you can label them. You know, we have a portrait, so wow, look at that beautiful portrait there. This guy's got glasses. He's always smiling. Okay, well, let's get back to business. Anyways, so we know, what do we know? Let's get our information. We know that the perimeter of this rectangle, this rectangular portrait, we know that the perimeter is 120 inches. Okay? And we know, what do you know? What clues do they give us? They tell us about a length and they tell us about a width. Okay? So we have here our length and we have our width. Now again, reading the problem, which one of these do they give us a clue about? They give us a clue right here. The portrait is 12 inches longer than it is wide. So they give us a clue about the length, but they don't tell us anything about the width. So that's where we're going to use our variable. And since we're dealing with width, let's just go ahead and call that the width W. So now that we know the width is W, what's the length? Well, 12 inches longer. What's 12 inches longer? Isn't that adding 12? So then the length is 12 inches longer than the width. So that means the length is W plus 12. So let's go ahead and label that. So here's my length, right? My length is W plus 12. And my width is just going to be W. So now let's think about how we find the perimeter of an object. We add all the sides together. That's one way to think about it. So if this top side is W, then this bottom side is also W. And if this right side is W plus 12, then this left side is also W plus 12, right? But there's another way to do it, kind of a shorthand way to do perimeter of a rectangle or perimeter of a quadrilateral. And that's to say perimeter equals, okay, 2L plus 2W. Why? Well, because you have two sides that are the width and two sides that are the length. So if we use that, we're going to go ahead and use that for this equation. We have everything we need. We know how to find the perimeter, and we know what the perimeter is already. Okay, it's right here, it's 120. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So we have the perimeter is 2L plus 2W. So what's our length? So perimeter equals 2 times, what's my width? My width is, my length, sorry. My length is W plus 12. So 2 times, parentheses, W plus 12. And there's my distributive property right there. Now I have plus, right? Plus 2 times the width. So 2 times, and what's my width? My width is just W. So basically this stays like this, 2 times W. And so now we can go ahead and work this equation out and figure out what's going on here. So, well, first thing, right? We don't need this P because we know what PE is. P is 120. Let's go ahead and erase that. And let's go ahead and put 120 in there because we already know what that is. Now, let's work this entire thing out and solve our equation. Of course, first we need to distribute. So what's 2 times W? That is 2 times 2W. And then secondly, 2 times positive 12. That is 24. Copy down the rest of the equation. We got 2W over here. And we have now 120 equals 2W plus 24 plus 2W. Okay. What's my next step? Well, again, I can combine like terms. I have 2W and 2W. So 2W plus 2W, that's 4W. So now on the right-hand side, I have 4W plus 24. And on the left, I have 120. So now we're back at your basic two-step equation. What's next? Undo addition, subtraction. I have to undo this positive 24 plus 24. How am I going to do that? I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides. Okay? And so here, these cancel out, additive inverse. On the right, this leaves me with a 4W. And on the left, 120 minus 24 is going to be 96. So we're almost there. Last step, get rid of this 4. So we're going to divide both sides by 4 because that 4 is multiplying W. Okay, and we find that our width is, well, let's see, 96 divided by 4. 4 goes into 96 2 times. That's 8. And we bring down, 4 goes into 16 4 times. So we know that the width is 24 inches. So if the length is 12 more than that, so what's the length of this portrait? The length of this portrait is 36 inches. We'll see that's correct because we have 2 times 36, that's 72. And 2 times 24, that's 48. And 72 plus 48 does equal 120, which is the perimeter of our portrait. All right, I hope this helps you with writing and solving equations that include the distributive property.